This is a stitch plan for the complete story. Due to the length exceeding direct response limits, the story is broken into chunks. Please request each chunk by its chunk ID to receive the full text. There are loves that bloom in the open, vibrant, and undeniable, and then there are those that unfurl in the quiet chambers of the heart, known only to the soul that carries them. Mine was of the latter kind, a tender secret woven into the very fabric of my being, a melody played softly in the deepest recesses of my memory. Evelyn, now in her late 70s, moved through the familiar rituals of her day with a practiced grace. The morning sun, a dependable companion, painted stripes across the worn Persian rug in her living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. The scent of old books and lavender, a fragrance cultivated over decades, hung in the air, a testament to a life lived thoughtfully, if not always loudly. Her hands, gnarled by time yet still capable, poured tea into a delicate, chipped porcelain cup. Each movement was deliberate, imbued with the quiet dignity that comes from years of self-possession. She was a widow, living alone in the house she and Arthur had shared for 50 years, a house filled with the echoes of a life that, to the casual observer, seemed complete, even idyllic. But completeness, she knew, was a nuanced affair. Arthur had been a good man, steady and kind, a reliable anchor in the often turbulent seas of life. Their marriage had been built on mutual respect, shared laughter, and a comfortable companionship. Yet even in the warmest embrace of their shared history, there had always been a quiet, almost imperceptible space within Evelyn, a chamber where another light flickered, soft and constant. It was not a betrayal of Arthur, not truly, but rather a testament to the heart's vast capacity, its ability to hold multiple truths, multiple affections, without diminishing any. This hidden space was a refuge, a private garden where a different kind of love had blossomed, one that had never seen the light of day, never been spoken aloud, yet had shaped her far more profoundly than many would ever guess. Sometimes, a particularly vivid memory would surface unbidden, like a perfectly preserved photograph emerging from a forgotten box. Perhaps it was the way the light fell on a certain oak tree in the garden, mimicking a distant summer afternoon, or the melancholy strain of a classical piece on the radio, pulling at a thread of memory she thought long since secured. These moments were not disruptive. They were instead a quiet affirmation, a whispered reminder of a truth that resided deep within her. It was a truth that had guided her choices, informed her empathy, and given her a unique understanding of the unspoken complexities of human connection. To those who knew her, Evelyn was a woman of quiet strength, known for her thoughtful advice and her serene demeanor. Her niece Eleanor, a bustling woman in her late 40s, often remarked on Evelyn's unflappable nature. Eleanor, with her busy life and 2 teenage children, couldn't fathom the depth of stillness Evelyn possessed, often mistaking it for simple contentment. But Evelyn knew that true contentment, like true love, was often found not in the absence of longing, but in the peaceful acceptance of its enduring presence. What, after all, is a life well lived, if not a tapestry woven with both joy and a certain dignified sorrow? She often thought of it like a beautiful piece of music, where the silences are as important as the notes played, giving resonance and meaning to the melody. Just as a skilled musician understands the power of a pause, Evelyn had come to understand the profound impact of unspoken affection. This internal richness wasn't something she advertised. It was simply a part of her, as intrinsic as the color of her eyes. It was a private world, meticulously catalogued and cherished, a testament to a love that had defied conventional boundaries and flourished in the fertile ground of memory. She had learned early on that not all loves are meant to be publicly declared or physically consummated to be real, to be potent. Some loves exist purely as an internal landscape, a constant companion that whispers wisdom and solace. This understanding had made her a more compassionate listener, a more patient friend, and a woman who saw beyond the surface of things, recognizing the hidden narratives that everyone carries within them. It was a quiet power, this ability to hold such a profound secret with grace, without bitterness. It was a testament to the idea that love, in its purest form, often thrives in the shadows of unspoken desires and societal constraints, leaving behind a legacy of poignant beauty and enduring regret. But regret for Evelyn was not a sharp biting pain. It was a soft ache, like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of what had been and what might have been. It was a part of her story, a thread in the intricate design of her life. She found solace in the quiet contemplation of it, much like one might find comfort in rereading a beloved, well-worn book, each page imbued with familiar emotion. Her days were punctuated by these gentle visits to the past, not as a dwelling on what was lost, but as an appreciation of what had been given. It was a love that had taught her the true meaning of patience, of empathy, and of the profound beauty in simply holding another's essence within one's own heart, even from a distance. The world outside her window continued its ceaseless, bustling rhythm, oblivious to the rich internal symphony playing within Evelyn. The cars hurried past, the neighbors went about their daily tasks, and the digital world hummed with its endless chatter. Yet Evelyn, with her quiet cup of tea and the scent of lavender in the air, resided in a different kind of time, a time where the past was not merely a memory, but a living, breathing presence, a silent partner in her journey. One afternoon, as she sat by the window, the sunlight catching the delicate dust motes, her fingers traced the worn binding of a book, a collection of poetry, a gift from decades ago. Its pages, yellowed and fragile, held not just verses, but an entire universe of unspoken emotions. It was a book he had loved, a book they had often discussed, their voices low, their eyes meeting over shared lines. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a smile born of both tenderness and a profound, gentle sorrow. It was a moment of quiet communion, a direct bridge across the years, connecting her present self to the girl she once was, and to the boy who had awakened such a deep, enduring affection within her. This wasn't a love that demanded grand gestures or public declarations. It was a love that had found its expression in shared silences, in understanding glances, in the quiet affirmation of two souls recognizing each other across the chasm of circumstance. It was a love that had, in its own way, provided a compass for her life, guiding her towards kindness, towards depth, toward a profound appreciation for the subtle beauty of human connection. It was a secret she carried not as a burden, but as a cherished treasure, a source of quiet strength. And as the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across her room, Evelyn knew that this enduring affection, this profound hidden love, was not an echo of the past, but a living, breathing part of her present. It was a story waiting to be told, not with words spoken aloud, but with the quiet unfolding of memory, inviting us to delve deeper into the journey of a heart that loved, truly and deeply, even in the shadows. The scent of rain on dry earth, even now, carries me back to that summer, to the unspoken promises in his eyes. It was a time when the world seemed to hold its breath, poised between the lingering dust of war and the burgeoning optimism of a new era. Our small town, nestled in the verdant embrace of the countryside, felt like a haven, a place where futures were still unwritten, and possibilities shimmered on the horizon like heat haze over summer fields. I was 17, a girl on the cusp of womanhood, with a mind brimming with books and a heart quietly yearning for something more profound than the familiar rhythms of village life. In those post-war years, life moved at a different pace. Evenings were spent gathered around radios, listening to stories unfold. or strolling through the town square, where young men, newly returned from service, mingled with the local girls. It was a time of rebuilding, not just of infrastructure, but of spirits, of reconnecting with simple joys and the promise of a peaceful future. Young people, particularly, were encouraged to find partners, to reestablish the social fabric that had been frayed by conflict. There was a collective desire for stability, for families to grow and thrive. But for me, the grand narrative of marriage and domesticity felt, at times, a little too prescribed, a little too loud. My own aspirations, nurtured in the quiet corners of the local library, often felt at odds with the gentle hum of expectation that permeated our community. He arrived one spring, a new assistant to the local doctor, a quiet man with eyes that held a depth I hadn't encountered before. John. His name, simple and strong, suited him. He wasn't boisterous or overtly charming like some of the other young men. Instead, he possessed a calm intensity, a thoughtful stillness that drew me in. Our first true conversation happened at the annual village fete, a bustling affair where children chased each other with sticky hands and women gossiped over lemonade. I was helping at the book stall, arranging worn copies of Dickens and Austen, when he approached, his gaze lingering on a collection of poetry. We spoke of literature, of the power of words to transcend time and place. It was a conversation that felt less like an exchange and more like a discovery, as if we were unearthing a shared language we hadn't known existed. His voice, a low, resonant baritone, held a certain cadence that made even the most mundane observations sound profound. I remember the way he tilted his head slightly when listening, a gesture of genuine engagement that was rare and deeply disarming. Over the following weeks, our paths seemed to intertwine with an almost fated regularity. We would meet by chance at the riverbank, where I often went to read, or at the market, where he'd be picking up supplies for the doctor's surgery. These encounters, initially brief, stretched into longer conversations, walks that meandered through sun-dappled lanes, and shared moments of quiet observation. We talked about everything and nothing, the changing seasons, the mysteries of the universe, the simple beauty of a wildflower. There was an understanding that grew between us, a silent communion that spoke louder than any pronouncements. It wasn't the kind of flashy, overt courtship one might see in films. It was far more subtle, more profound. It was in the way his eyes would find mine across a crowded room, a fleeting connection that felt like a secret shared. He would often bring me small gifts, a perfectly smooth river stone, a particularly vibrant autumn leaf, tokens that spoke not of grand affection, but of thoughtful attention, of seeing the world through a shared lens. These were not expensive trinkets, but rather small, meaningful gestures that resonated deeply with my own quiet nature. It was like watching two constellations slowly align in the night sky, their orbits drawing them closer with an inevitable, gentle force. There was a sense of inevitability, a quiet certainty that our connection was something special, something different. It felt like the discovery of a perfectly tuned instrument, ready to play a melody only we could hear. Our affection, though unspoken, deepened with each passing day. It was a delicate bloom, nurtured by shared glances and whispered thoughts, a fragile promise held in the space between us. We never spoke of love in those early days, not in the way young people often do, with breathless declarations. Our connection was more elemental, a quiet knowing that settled deep within the heart. It was a love that didn't demand grand gestures or public displays. It thrived in the intimacy of shared silences and the subtle language of understanding. We understood each other in a way that felt entirely unique, as if our souls recognized a kindred spirit across the expanse of the world. This profound connection, however, was not without its shadows. The unspoken nature of our bond also carried a certain vulnerability, a delicate balance that could be easily disrupted by the louder demands of the world. The expectations of our families, the differing trajectories of our lives, all began to loom, faint but perceptible, on the edges of our shared world. It was a beautiful, hopeful time, yet tinged with the melancholic awareness that such delicate beauty might be fleeting, like the morning mist that clings to the valleys, beautiful but destined to dissipate with the rising sun. The narrative will shift from nostalgic beginnings to the subtle currents of societal expectations and personal aspirations that began to shape their path. This budding affection, so pure and hopeful, would soon face the quiet pressures of a world that often valued pragmatism over poetry and prescribed roles over individual desires. The innocent hope of those early days would soon be tested, forcing us to confront the delicate balance between personal yearning and the broader tapestry of life's demands. We built a world between us, not of grand gestures or whispered vows, but of shared silences and understanding glances. It was a realm understood only by us, a delicate tapestry woven from moments that, to an outsider, might have seemed utterly unremarkable. After those initial encounters, a rhythm began to form, a gentle current pulling us closer. Our meetings became less accidental, more anticipated, like the first tentative blossoms of spring after a long winter. We'd find ourselves drawn to the same quiet corners of the village green, perhaps under the sprawling shade of the ancient oak, or lingering a little longer after a community gathering, our eyes meeting across a crowded room. It wasn't overt. No declarations were made, no promises exchanged aloud. Instead, our connection deepened in the unsaid, in the subtle shifts of expression, the knowing smiles that passed between us when others were engrossed in their own conversations. We learned to communicate in a language spoken only by our eyes, a dialect of shared understanding that bypassed the need for words entirely. It was a profound intimacy, built not on shared experiences of grand adventures, but on the quiet observation of each other's souls. This silent dialogue felt more substantial, more real, than any spoken vow. Our rendezvous often took place by the old mill pond, its surface reflecting the changing moods of the sky, from the crisp blue of midday to the fiery oranges of sunset. He would speak of his aspirations, his dreams of working with his hands, of building things that would last, perhaps even a sturdy bridge over the very stream that fed the pond. I, in turn, would share my quiet longing for a life that held more than just domesticity, perhaps a small shop filled with the scent of lavender and dried herbs, a place where I could arrange flowers or mend delicate lace, creating beauty with my own hands. These weren't ambitions shouted from the rooftops, but gentle confessions shared under the dappled light of willow trees, their branches weeping gracefully towards the water. It felt like planting tiny seeds of hope in fertile ground. One afternoon, while sketching the intricate patterns of a dragonfly's wing, its iridescent shimmer catching the sunlight, he remarked, "You see the world with such clarity, don't you? As if every detail holds a story, every shadow a secret." His voice was low, thoughtful, a soft murmur against the gentle hum of the afternoon, and it felt as though he had peered directly into the deepest part of my being, past the polite smiles and practiced gestures. That simple observation, more than any compliment, solidified something profound within me. It was a recognition of my inner self, a validation that I hadn't often found elsewhere, a feeling akin to finding a lost piece of a puzzle. It made me wonder, how many people truly see us, beyond the roles we play, beyond the expectations society places upon us? We spent hours like this, sometimes reading aloud from worn paperbacks, the pages softened by countless readings, sharing the quiet joy of a well-turned phrase. Other times, we simply sat, wrapped in a companionable silence that was richer than any conversation, the kind of silence that only true understanding can forge. He had a way of looking at me, a gentle intensity in his gaze, that made me feel entirely seen, entirely understood, as if my very thoughts were transparent to him. It was as if our thoughts flowed seamlessly between us, a quiet river connecting two distant shores, its currents carrying unspoken truths. This unspoken communion became the bedrock of our affection, a sanctuary from the bustling world outside, a secret garden where our spirits could intertwine. Yet, even in our secluded world, the faint echoes of the larger world began to intrude, like distant thunder on a clear day. My mother, a woman of practical sensibilities, her life a testament to duty and order, would often speak of suitable matches and sensible futures. She envisioned a life for me that was secure, predictable, and above all, socially acceptable. A path as straight and narrow as the village lane. "A good marriage is a woman's greatest asset, dear," she'd often say, her words like gentle, persistent rain against a window pane, seemingly harmless, yet capable of eroding the strongest resolve. Her concerns weren't malicious, merely a reflection of the societal norms of the time, where a woman's standing was often intrinsically linked to her husband's profession and status. The notion of marrying for love, especially if that love didn't align with familial expectations, was often viewed as a romantic folly, a fleeting fancy best put aside for more practical considerations. It was a world where sentiment often bowed to security, and personal happiness was sometimes a secondary concern to social standing. His family, too, carried their own set of expectations, as weighty and enduring as the stones of the family mill. They were hard-working, grounded people, proud of their lineage and their trade, their lives rooted in the earth and the rhythm of the seasons. They saw a future for him that involved continuing the family business, a path that offered stability, but perhaps little room for deviation, like a well-worn groove in a wooden floor. The subtle pressures from both sides began to form an invisible wall around our burgeoning connection, a wall we could feel, even if we couldn't yet see its full height, its foundations slowly being laid by tradition and expectation. It was like watching two streams converge, their waters mingling for a brief, beautiful stretch, knowing that eventually they would have to choose different paths to reach the vast, indifferent sea. The unspoken question lingered: could our small, shared world withstand the tide of these larger forces? One evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose, and the first stars began to prick through the deepening blue, he spoke of his father's insistence on his apprenticeship, a path that would take him away, at least for a time. His voice held a note of resignation, a quiet acceptance of duty that was both admirable and heartbreaking. I listened, my heart a heavy stone in my chest, understanding without him needing to elaborate, the unspoken words echoing louder than any declaration. We knew instinctively that our world of shared silences, however profound, existed precariously on the edge of these external realities, like a delicate bird's nest swaying in a rising wind. How many dreams, I wondered, are quietly reshaped by the currents of expectation, by the silent demands of family and community? I remember a particular afternoon, walking through the bustling market, the air thick with the scent of fresh produce and lively chatter. We weren't holding hands, but our shoulders brushed, a subtle, almost imperceptible contact that sent a shiver through me, a tiny electric current. A distant cousin, Martha, a woman known for her sharp tongue and even sharper observations, her eyes missing nothing, caught sight of us. Her gaze lingered a moment too long, a knowing glint in her eye that felt like a pinprick. Later at supper, my mother casually inquired about my afternoon, her tone deceptively light, like a feather concealing a stone. "I hear you were admiring the wares at the market with young Thomas," she remarked, a subtle emphasis on young Thomas that implied a certain impropriety, a blossoming affection that was perhaps not entirely sanctioned. It was a small incident, yet it served as a stark reminder of the watchful eyes of our community, the invisible threads of gossip and expectation that bound us, a web from which escape seemed impossible. It was a world where even the most innocent of shared moments could be subject to scrutiny, dissected and judged. This wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow gathering cloud on the horizon, its shadows gradually lengthening. We continued our quiet meetings, cherishing each stolen moment, each shared glance, but a new undertone of melancholy began to seep into our shared silences, like a faint persistent chill. The unspoken question of what next hung heavy in the air, a silent companion to our blossoming affection, a question without an answer. It was a delicate dance between the purity of our connection and the encroaching realities of our lives, a fragile balance. We were like two saplings, growing beautifully intertwined, their branches reaching for the same sun, yet rooted in different soils, sensing the inevitable pull that would try to separate us, to force us into distinct, solitary growth. The world outside our bubble, with its firmly established rules and expectations, its unyielding demands, was beginning to exert its undeniable force, a current too strong to swim against. My own internal conflict began to mirror the external pressures. Could I truly defy the expectations laid out for me? Expectations that felt as ingrained as the patterns on my grandmother's china? Was my quiet longing for something more, for a life less ordinary, enough to challenge the well-trodden path, the comfortable predictability of my future? These were questions that began to prick at the edges of my burgeoning affection, like tiny thorns on a blooming rose, reminding me of its vulnerability. Could love, in its purest form, truly conquer all, or was it destined to bend to the will of circumstance, to the unyielding hand of fate? This internal debate, though unvoiced, added another layer of complexity to our delicate world. The weight of these unspoken obstacles grew heavier with each passing week, pressing down on us like the humid air before a summer storm. We found ourselves instinctively seeking out even more secluded spots, deeper within the woods, along forgotten paths, as if to protect our fragile connection from the world's intrusive gaze. One evening, beneath the sprawling ancient branches of an oak, its gnarled limbs reaching towards the twilight sky, the silence between us stretched, no longer entirely companionable, but laced with a quiet tension, a palpable sense of foreboding. He took my hand, his touch gentle but firm, a reassuring anchor in the gathering gloom, and for the first time, his gaze held not just understanding, but a profound sadness, a sorrow that mirrored my own. "My father has made arrangements," he said, his voice barely a whisper, a mere breath against the vastness of the evening. "For me to go to the city, to learn the finer points of the trade," he says. "It's for 2 years." The words hung in the cool evening air, heavy and irrefutable, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile structure of our shared world. It wasn't a question, nor a plea, but a statement of an unchangeable future, a decree from a world beyond our control. It was the moment the invisible wall became visible, solid and unyielding, a barrier that seemed to rise instantaneously between us. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden chill despite the lingering warmth of his hand, as if a cold wind had swept through my very soul. It was the quiet, devastating realization that our shared silences, our world built on unspoken understanding, was about to be fractured by the very real demands of life, shattered into 1,000 pieces by the hammer of necessity. There were no tears, no dramatic protests, no desperate pleas against the inevitable. We simply sat there, his hand still holding mine, a final tangible link, as the twilight deepened around us, swallowing the last vestiges of daylight. What could be said? The path laid out for him was one of duty and tradition, a path that, in that era, few young men of his standing could easily refuse, a current too strong to fight. And for me, The expectations of my own family, though less immediate in their demand, were equally clear, a different but equally unyielding path. We understood, without needing to articulate it, that this was not a choice we were making, but a fate being presented to us, a destiny woven by forces far greater than our individual desires. The profound intimacy we had cultivated, the unspoken language we shared, now served only to amplify the quiet ache of this impending separation, making the wound deeper, the parting more poignant. We had built a world between us. Yes, a beautiful, secret world, but it was a world that existed within the confines of a larger, more demanding one, a fragile bubble destined to burst. We were two solitary figures, standing on the precipice of divergent paths, bound by an affection too deep for words, yet too fragile to withstand the currents of the world, like two ships sailing towards different horizons. The stars began to prick through the darkening sky, each one a tiny, distant promise, a cold, indifferent witness to our quiet sorrow. We knew in that moment, with a certainty that chilled us to the bone, that our paths were destined to diverge, leaving behind a bittersweet ache, a quiet testament to a love that deepened in the face of growing tensions. The future, once a canvas of hopeful possibilities, now seemed etched with the clear, unyielding lines of separate journeys, a landscape of what might have been. Life, as it often does, diverged our paths, leaving behind a faint, indelible echo of what might have been. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic rupture, no tempestuous farewell under a weeping sky. Instead, it was a slow, deliberate unspooling, like a meticulously woven tapestry unraveling thread by delicate thread. The summer of '48 had promised so much, a tapestry of shared dreams and whispered futures. But as autumn deepened, so did the shadows of reality. His family, with their roots deep in the fertile soil of their ancestral farm, saw a future carved from the land. My own, with its aspirations for a life beyond the village, envisioned a different trajectory for me. It was a familiar narrative of the times, a quiet clash between tradition and ambition, between the comfort of the known and the allure of the unexplored. We were both caught in its currents, two small boats on a widening river. The conversations grew heavier, laden with unspoken questions and hesitant answers. We'd walk the familiar paths, past fields now turning golden, and the silence between us was no longer companionable, but thick with an impending sense of loss. I remember one particular afternoon, the air crisp with the promise of winter, when he spoke of his father's expectations, the weight of generations resting on his shoulders. He didn't ask me to stay, nor did I offer. We both understood the unspoken truth. His world was here, rooted and demanding, and mine, though still nebulous, was calling me elsewhere. It wasn't a lack of love, but a recognition of two different destinies, like parallel lines that run close but never truly converge. My mother, ever practical, gently reminded me of the opportunities that awaited me in the city, the chance for an education, a career beyond the confines of village life. Her words, though well-intentioned, felt like a steady current pushing me further away. There was no villain in our story, no grand betrayal, just the inexorable march of life's circumstances. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, like the slow turning of the seasons, each day bringing a new shade of inevitability. I found myself spending more time alone, walking by the river, watching the water flow endlessly downstream, a silent metaphor for the changes unfolding within me. The pain wasn't sharp, but a dull, persistent ache, like a stone carried deep in a pocket. It was the quiet suffering of a choice made not by desire, but by the perceived dictates of a larger world. I learned to carry it with a certain dignity, a quiet resolve that belied the turmoil within. I recall a conversation with Mrs. Henderson, a kind elderly woman who ran the village bakery. She had seen many young hearts broken by the village's unspoken rules. She once told me, "Sometimes, dear, the hardest path is the one that leads you away from what you love, but towards who you are meant to be." Her words, simple yet profound, offered a sliver of solace, a recognition that my feelings were not unique, that others had navigated these difficult waters before. It was a small act of empathy that, even now, I hold dear. My resilience wasn't born of defiance, but of a quiet acceptance. I knew I couldn't change the course of things, but I could choose how I would navigate them. It was a lesson in stoicism, perhaps, long before I knew the word. I focused on my studies, on the practical preparations for my departure. Each textbook I opened, each plan I made, was a brick in the wall I was building around my heart, not to forget, but to protect. There were moments, of course, when the wall would crumble, when a familiar song on the radio or the sight of a couple walking hand in hand would bring a fresh wave of sorrow. But these moments became less frequent, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. I was learning to adapt, to find a new rhythm in the quiet hum of my own aspirations. It was a period of quiet suffering, yes, but also of profound growth, like a seed pushing through hard ground towards the light. Our final meeting was not a grand farewell, but a quiet moment by the old oak tree, where we had spent so many afternoons. The air was cold, biting. We stood for what felt like an eternity, the unspoken words heavier than any declaration. His eyes, usually so full of warmth, held a profound sadness, a mirror of my own. He simply took my hand, squeezed it once, and then let go. There were no tears, no dramatic pleas, just the profound silence of two souls acknowledging an irreversible truth. It was the quiet, definitive click of a door closing, not slammed shut, but gently, irrevocably, sealing off a path we would not walk together. The silence in the room felt vast, echoing the emptiness that had begun to settle in my chest. It was a moment of stark realization, a finality that left no room for doubt or hope. In the days and weeks that followed, I immersed myself in the logistics of my new life. The city, with its bustling streets and endless possibilities, became my refuge. I found solace in the anonymity, in the sheer volume of new experiences that demanded my attention. The ache in my heart remained, a phantom limb of a love lost, but it no longer consumed me. I learned to live with it, to carry it as a part of my story. It was like a river carving its own path around an obstacle, not erasing the obstacle, but finding a way forward, nonetheless. I discovered a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed, a resilience that allowed me to build a new life, brick by painstaking brick. I found comfort in routine, in the predictable rhythm of my days, each one a small triumph over the lingering sadness. I began to understand that adaptation wasn't about forgetting, but about integrating the past into a new present, allowing it to inform, but not define, my future. Perhaps true love isn't always about possession, but about the quiet act of holding someone's essence within you, forever. This truth, so profoundly felt in the solitude of my own heart, became the compass by which I navigated the wider currents of life after our paths diverged, a silent guide in a world often too loud. The years that followed our parting were not barren, nor were they devoid of affection. I married, as was expected, a kind and steady man named Thomas. He offered a different sort of love, one built on companionship, shared responsibilities, and a comforting predictability. It was a love that felt like a well-tended garden, orderly and fruitful, much like the familiar rows of vegetables in a neighbor's plot. Yet, it lacked the wild, untamed beauty of a hidden meadow, where the rarest flowers bloomed only for me, their fragrance a secret joy. This distinction was not a judgment against Thomas, whose gentle spirit I truly cherished, but simply an acknowledgement of the heart's vast and varied capacities. Thomas, a quiet man himself, a local historian who meticulously catalogued the forgotten stories of our town, understood the value of unspoken narratives, though he never knew the full depth of mine. Could he have sensed the silent symphony playing within me? My relationship with Thomas was a tapestry woven with threads of respect and gentle affection. There was a quiet understanding between us, a comfortable rhythm that many would envy, a steady beat in the everyday hum of life. Yet within me, a private chamber remained, adorned with the echoes of another's presence, a sanctuary for memories. It was not a betrayal, for how can one betray a love that never fully materialized in the world, a love that existed primarily in the realm of what if? Rather, it was a testament to the enduring power of a connection that transcended the conventional definitions of partnership, a bond forged in shared silences and unspoken dreams. This internal landscape, rich with memory and unspoken longing, subtly influenced my every choice. My capacity for empathy, I believe, deepened immeasurably, allowing me to see the unseen struggles and quiet joys in others. I found myself drawn to narratives of quiet resilience, to art that spoke of profound, unrequited affections, to music that carried a melancholic beauty. It was as if my heart, having known such a unique depth of feeling, could not settle for superficiality. Just as a seasoned chef, having tasted the finest ingredients, develops a nuanced palate, my emotional discernment had been refined, making me keenly aware of the subtle flavors of human connection. What a profound education that love had been. I often wondered if Thomas sensed it, this gentle ghost that walked beside me, always present, never intrusive. He was a man of keen observation, though not one for probing emotional depths. His curiosity lay more in historical records than in the intricate workings of the human heart. Perhaps he saw it in the way my gaze would sometimes drift, lost in an unseen vista, or in the particular quality of my silence, a silence that held more than just quiet. He never questioned, never pressed. He simply accepted me, whole and complete, with the quiet dignity that was his hallmark, much like accepting the changing seasons without complaint. Our children, two bright and curious souls, brought immense joy into my life, filling our home with laughter and purpose. When they asked about love, as children often do, their innocent questions prompting deep reflection, I found myself speaking not just of the practicalities of a shared life, but of the mysterious pull of two souls, of understanding without words, of a connection that could defy time and distance. I spoke of love as a force that shapes us, not just in its presence, but in its absence too, like the sculptor's hand shaping clay, even in the spaces between touches. These conversations were not explicit confessions, but rather distillations of a wisdom gained through a love that had taught me much about myself and the world, a quiet legacy passed on. My career, too, felt the subtle impress of this enduring affection. I pursued a path in education, finding solace and purpose in nurturing young minds, much like tending to delicate seedlings. The patience, the understanding, the belief in unspoken potential, these were qualities I had cultivated in the quiet garden of my private love, a garden whose blossoms were for my eyes alone. It was a fulfilling path, one that allowed me to contribute to the world in a meaningful way, far removed from the grand gestures and public accolades that often define success. It was a quiet victory, much like the love that inspired it, a triumph of the spirit over circumstance. In an era where women's professional options were often limited to teaching, nursing, or secretarial work, finding such profound personal resonance in my chosen field felt like a small triumph, a quiet rebellion of the heart against societal norms. But even in purpose, the past whispered its lessons. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, A moment arrived that stirred the quiet waters of memory with an unexpected force, like a stone dropped into a still pond. I was walking through the old market square, a place I had frequented since childhood, now bustling with new generations, their youthful energy a stark contrast to my own measured pace. The scent of roasted chestnuts hung in the air, mingling with the earthy fragrance of fallen leaves, a sensory tapestry of the season. My eyes, accustomed to scanning faces for the familiar contours of age, suddenly caught sight of a profile that seemed impossibly unchanged, yet undeniably weathered by time, like an ancient oak still standing tall. He stood by a bookstall, his head tilted slightly, a familiar gesture as he perused the spines, a habit I remembered so well. It was him. After all these decades, there he was. A tremor, light as a butterfly's wing, passed through me, a delicate shiver of recognition. My breath hitched, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, as if the air itself held its breath. I stopped, hidden partially by a vendor's awning, and watched. The years had etched lines around his eyes, silvered his temples, but the essence, the particular way he held himself, the thoughtful curve of his mouth, it was all there, an indelible signature of his being. He picked up a worn copy of a poetry anthology, the very same one we had devoured together in our youth, sharing verses under a willow tree, its pages now softened by time and countless readings. A small smile played on his lips as he turned a page, a private smile that I remembered so vividly, a fleeting glimpse into his inner world. It was a moment suspended in time, a tableau of the past laid gently upon the present, a ghost of what was, made real. My heart, which I thought had long since found its steady rhythm, began to beat with a forgotten urgency, a quiet drum against my ribs. It wasn't the frantic pulse of youthful longing, but a deeper, more resonant thrum, like a distant drumbeat echoing across a vast plain, carrying a message from another time. It was curiosity, certainly, and a profound sense of recognition, but also a quiet acknowledgement of the enduring power of that unspoken bond, a thread that had never truly broken. I wondered if he would look up, if our eyes would meet across the bustling square. What would I say? What would he say? Would the chasm of decades be bridged in an instant, or would it remain a silent testament to the lives we had each built separately, two parallel lines never quite converging? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, a dizzying blend of hope and apprehension. Our connection, though never fully realized, had been a watermark on the fine paper of my existence, subtle yet indelible, visible only when held up to the light. It had shaped the very grain of my being, influencing my choices, my values, my understanding of the world, like a river carving its path through stone. It was a love that had taught me that sometimes the deepest connections are those that exist not in grand declarations, but in the quiet, persistent holding of someone's essence within you, a sacred trust. And as I stood there, observing him from afar, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, a quiet joy that transcended any lingering regret, like the gentle warmth of the setting sun. It was a mature perspective, born of a life fully lived, recognizing that the beauty of our story lay precisely in its unwritten chapters, in the potential that forever shimmered just beyond reach, a promise whispered on the wind. He looked up then, his gaze sweeping across the market, and for a fleeting instant, his eyes met mine. There was a flicker, a momentary hesitation, a question in their depths, a silent query hanging in the air. Did he recognize me? Or was it merely the universal acknowledgement of one stranger meeting another in a crowd, a fleeting connection between two souls passing by? My heart paused, suspended, like a bird mid-flight. It was a fraction of a second, yet it felt like an eternity, a lifetime compressed into a breath. Then His gaze moved on, settling on a young couple laughing nearby, their joy a vibrant splash of color in the muted tapestry of the market. The moment passed, as swiftly and silently as it had arrived, leaving only a faint ripple in its wake. A soft sigh escaped my lips, almost inaudible, a whisper of acceptance. He hadn't recognized me, or perhaps he had, and simply chosen not to acknowledge the ghost of a past that might complicate his present, a choice I understood implicitly. And in that realization, there was no sting of disappointment, but rather a profound sense of rightness, a quiet affirmation of destiny. The encounter had not been about rekindling a flame, but about confirming its enduring glow within me, a steady ember that warmed my soul. It was a quiet affirmation that the love I had carried, the essence I had held, was real, and had always been real, regardless of external validation, a truth etched deep within. It was a love that had taught me the profound difference between possession and presence, between a shared life and a shared soul. And in that distinction, I found a quiet, enduring strength, a bedrock upon which my later life was built. And so I learned that some loves are not meant to be lived out loud, but rather to resonate as a quiet, constant melody within the soul, a testament to the heart's capacity for enduring affection. This realization, a slow-blooming flower in the garden of my later years, has become the bedrock of my understanding, a wisdom gleaned from a life lived with a profound, unfulfilled connection. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a gentle unfurling, much like the first light of dawn painting the sky after a long night. The world often champions grand narratives of love, the sweeping gestures, the passionate declarations, the happily ever afters etched in stone. But what of the loves that defy such easy categorization, the ones that exist in the delicate space between what is said and what is deeply felt? These, I've come to believe, hold a unique, enduring power. They are the quiet rivers that carve deep, unseen paths through the landscape of a life, shaping its contours in ways more profound than any roaring waterfall. They are the silent architects of our inner world, building structures of resilience and understanding where others might only see absence. My affection for him, that young man from long ago, never found its conventional expression. We didn't marry, didn't build a home together, didn't share children or grow old side by side in the way society prescribed. Yet, to say it was unfulfilled feels almost inaccurate now, for it fulfilled something far deeper within me. It cultivated a capacity for empathy, a keen sensitivity to the unspoken, and a profound appreciation for the subtle beauty in human connection. It was a love that taught me the difference between possession and presence, between demanding and simply being. Think of a cherished book on a shelf, its pages worn from countless readings. You don't own the story, not truly, but you carry its essence within you, its characters and lessons woven into the fabric of your own being. This was our love, a story I reread countless times in the quiet chambers of my heart, each time discovering new nuances, new layers of meaning. It was a constant companion, a silent confidant, shaping my perspective on all other relationships that followed. This understanding wasn't readily available in my younger years. Society then, as now, often equates love with a checklist of achievements: marriage, family, shared property. Anything outside that framework was often dismissed as fleeting, or worse, a failure. But life, in its infinite wisdom, teaches us that the heart's geography is far more complex than any map. It's like navigating a vast ocean with only a small, familiar chart. You soon discover there are currents and depths far beyond what you initially perceived. I recall a conversation with my dear friend Eleanor many years ago when she lamented a failed romance. I remember telling her, "Eleanor, sometimes the most profound connections are not those that culminate in a traditional union, but those that leave an indelible mark on your soul, guiding you, shaping you, long after the physical presence is gone. She looked at me, puzzled then, her own heart still tethered to conventional expectations. But I see now that I was already articulating a truth I was still learning to fully embrace. This quiet wisdom, born from my own experience, became a compass for others, a gentle hand guiding them through their own emotional landscapes. It taught me that true love isn't about fitting a mold, but about the unique imprint it leaves on your spirit. The quiet victories of such a love are manifold. It's the victory of maintaining an inner sanctuary, a place where genuine affection resides, untainted by the demands of the everyday. It's the victory of knowing oneself deeply and truly through the mirror of another's gaze, even if that gaze is now a memory. It's the triumph of resilience, of choosing to carry tenderness rather than bitterness. This love didn't detract from my life. It enriched it, providing a subtle, constant current beneath the surface of all my other experiences. It was like a watermark on fine paper, not immediately visible, but undeniably present, giving strength and character to the entire sheet. It allowed me to approach other relationships, my marriage, my friendships, my interactions with the world, with a greater depth of understanding, a quiet patience, and a profound respect for the unseen currents that bind us all. It taught me to look beyond the superficial, to seek the true essence of connection. Much like an experienced gardener learns to appreciate the roots as much as the blossoms. This enduring affection became a wellspring of quiet strength, a reminder that even in absence, love can be a powerful, transformative force. This profound influence extended to my choices, both large and small. When faced with decisions about career or relocation, I found myself guided by an almost unconscious desire to protect that inner sanctuary, to ensure my life allowed space for reflection and quiet contemplation. It wasn't a conscious rejection of conventional success, but a redefinition of what success meant to me, a life rich in internal resonance rather than external accolades. My marriage, too, was shaped by this understanding. While it was a love of a different kind, built on shared lives and daily companionship, the quiet wisdom gleaned from my unfulfilled affection allowed me to appreciate its unique strengths without demanding it fill every emotional void. It taught me the beauty of distinct loves, each serving a different, yet equally vital purpose in the tapestry of a life. It was a subtle alchemy, transforming potential regret into profound gratitude. The true climax of this journey for me wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a tearful reunion, but a moment of profound internal peace. It arrived not with fanfare, but with the soft light of a setting sun filtering through my window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. In that quiet glow, I felt a complete acceptance of all that had transpired, the longing, the unspoken words, the divergent paths. There was no regret, no "what if?" Only a deep, abiding gratitude for the profound gift of having known such a connection, for having been capable of such deep feeling. It was a realization that love, in its purest form, doesn't demand possession. It simply is. It expands the heart, not constricts it. It lifts the spirit, not weighs it down with expectations. This was the ultimate freedom, the quiet victory over the societal narratives that once shackled my understanding of what love should be. It was like finally finding the perfect note in a complex melody, a resonance that brought all the disparate parts into harmonious balance. And so, here I sit, in the soft twilight of my years, my life unfolding like a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, connection and solitude. The love I carried for him is not a burden, but a precious jewel, polished by time and reflection. It has taught me that the truest measure of love isn't its outward manifestation, but its inward resonance. It's the quiet strength it lends, the gentle wisdom it imparts, the enduring warmth it leaves in its wake. It is a testament to the heart's boundless capacity to love, not just for a season, but for a lifetime, even when that love exists primarily in the realm of memory and spirit. It is a love that transcends the ordinary, becoming a part of the very air I breathe, the very essence of who I am. This concludes the story. I hope you enjoyed this journey through memory and emotion.